Warsaw or Berlin or Vienna, they had some sense of the same journey when they left Europe, if they were fortunate enough to get away. And I think we see the fallout of that immigration in their children, as those of us have probably seen in our cousins or brothers and sisters, or even our parents, if they came as young children to this country. So I felt there was a lot of kinship here between the Indian immigrants and the Jewish immigrants that we may know or that we feel closer to. And I don't think I was wrong. I didn't. I saw some relationships to my own family, but I will get into that later. Nothing too dramatic. But where should we start? I mean, let's just start generally for change instead of at the beginning of the movie, because it's told in beautiful chronological order. I have to say, covering decades, this film really did a great job. Every time they touched down to connect us with a certain year or a moment in their lives, it was a genuine moment, and convincing. And it didn't need any expounding around that. It could advance us. After the first child is born, then you see the second child. Clearly they're on their way, creating a family in Astoria or Queens, across the 59th Street Bridge, as my wife said. So, but let's start generally this time. Did this film resonate for you in your own immigration or your parents' immigration story? Does anybody want to chime in on that? Risa. You're muted, dear.
I just want to say that names in India and the changing of names and the formal name is not part of the immigration story particularly. No. In the Jewish community, everybody has an Indian name, and it's usually based on where the family came from as far as the name of a city or a community. And they have a what I would call their Jewish name, but it's actually the name that they go by most of the time. And they carry the two names. Now, the pilots of the oil tankers never use their real name. Not their real name, but their common name. They use their Indian name so that they can go to ports that are, shall we say, not safe for Jewish people. And they wouldn't be able to deliver the oil there. So they use their Indian name. So the fact that they weren't interested in what the name was going to be right away when he was born, but they got forced into it, and he took Gogol. But that's just not unusual in India that there are different names. So our friends have a son, Vishal, and he's known as Shalom. But he uses Vishal in school and in college and everything. He used the name Vishal, but he had the name Shalom as well. Right. So it's just important to know.
Yeah, this Indian family, though, cited two names. One is the vernacular name, which was not religious.
Right,
and
not religious,
the proper name.
Right, but that's what people have. They have a proper name and another.
I see. So the Jews of India take as their proper name a Hebrew name.
A Jewish name.
A Jewish name.
I love it.
A Jewish name. Yeah. So it's very important. Namesake is very important. What your name is tells a whole story. So that's always been very important to me.
And for those of you who don't know, Risa is a big devotee of India and has traveled there and was very impacted by the culture. Did this film resonate as authentic for you?
100%. Absolutely 100%. That and the other movie that you told us to see, which I wound up seeing as well, the Generation movie,
the current documentary.
Yeah, that was excellent. Excellent.
See, that's rare in that they turn the camera on themselves.
Yes.
And this young woman covered 3 generations of her family.
Of her own family. But that's the way they live in India. Yeah. With the maid in the kitchen sleeps in the kitchen or sleeps in the bed with one of the small children. Mm-hmm. So that's part of the culture. And the other thing I did, by the way, was I have never been big on literature as a course in school or anything, and I hadn't read much Russian literature. Right now I'm reading Crime and Punishment, and I stopped and I went to read The Overcoat by Nikolai Gogol. Fantastic, just fantastic. The story has no resonance as really in the movie, except that it's what saved his life. But it's
The overcoat saved the life of the character in the book.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Just like Gogol saved Ashok's life in the train, sort of.
Yes, yeah. but that's what it's all about. So anyway, I loved it.
Okay, I think Michael Cheskas had something to say.
Yeah, I was just going to address your original question. To me, I didn't actually necessarily see specific resonance between the Jewish immigrant experience and the Indian immigrant experience as differentiated from other immigrant experiences. But I definitely saw a lot of parallels in general. I mean, obviously, we were just talking about names, which is a big feature. And so there's sort of this obvious parallel with, the notion that we all have American names and Hebrew names. It's not a total parallel with what's described as being in India. And then one of the other things that struck me was mourning ritual, which it didn't say specifically, but the shaving of the head seemed to be a specific mourning ritual, maybe for a parent. And certainly the gathering back at the house was very reminiscent of a Shiva. And I recognize that's also present in other cultures, but to have that religious gathering at a home as opposed to just like a traditional wake or something, definitely seemed like a parallel.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. What I noticed this time when I watched it was there's a flashback, Michael, where he, as a young boy, I believe, is watching his father shave his head. So somebody passed in their family. It's just a fleeting thing, and it's this charming thing that connects the generations, which is what the ritual is meant to do, I think. So sweet. Steve Miller?
One of the interesting things I thought was how in a lot of immigrant families, they try to give their children very American names. And in this family, they didn't do that until the second child. Or in the case of my grandmother, for many years, all she had was her Yiddish name. And as a young adult, she wanted a sophisticated American name and changed her name to Thelma. But
that's my late husband, that's my mother-in-law.
We have a Chinese friend whose name is Wilma. So I think that I thought it was interesting, though, that it took them a while. And I think that her being cooped up at home, the wife, had something to do with they're not totally being ready to immerse themselves as Americans, or at least Ashima, I think her name was not so ready for that. And so until Sophie came along, there was much more of a struggle with it, I think.
Yeah, also her job at the library, which we learned late in the movie, and her friend there was a big assimilation tool for her. I mean, she found a friend from another culture that she totally trusted, which takes you across that I'm not a stranger anymore because I know somebody well whom I trust in this new culture. But you'll notice that I don't know if it's her first day, but after he leaves to go to the office, even though he's an academic, being gone for 3 weeks, she then goes out on her own to the laundromat. Now, I don't know if it's 3 weeks later or that day, but the point is she goes out on her own, sloshing through the slush, and there's some homeless man grumbling and complaining as he takes off his clothes, and she's surprised to see that. So there's some culture shock going on there, but she had the courage to do that on her own, even though this was her first time being alone and away from the loving concerns of her family. Anybody else? Did it resonate in other ways for people? Steve?
I hadn't even seen the film, but I tuned in to listen and to learn. But family is so special to all of us, and to listen to everyone talking, I just want to hear all the comments because Selma is my late mother-in-law's name, and I just brought a tear to my eye because I miss her. Thank you for your input.
Well, I'm glad you're getting that out of the conversation. Wait till you see the movie afterwards. It's really worth seeing. If this is resonating with you, the movie will really get to you.
Jim, maybe I missed it, but I didn't know, what did the husband do? He was gone for 3 weeks.
Well,
That ever come up?
Remember when he's introduced to her for the first time, he's getting a PhD in fiber optics. And he went to the States for some opportunity, whether it was teaching in New York, but he's certainly going to Ohio to teach in his last scene.
Because be gone for 3 weeks. And I'm thinking, where is he going for 3 weeks?
Well, I mean, even teachers have to go back, occasionally. Howard. Oh, sorry, Steve was next, Howard. Steve Zimmerman.
Okay, I really enjoyed the movie. It reminded me that has some similarities to The Big Sick, if anybody's seen that, and the immigrant experience. I thought the portrayal by the mother,
Taboo,
yeah. Was great. She comes across as incredibly strong character, and she evoked the most empathy for me out of the whole cast. I kind of was really found her performance compelling, and interesting. They would drop some guilt on their son, but not as much as in some Jewish traditions. I think of there was a little bit of guilt from the parents, but not that much. They were pretty stoical in a lot of ways, actually.
Pragmatic too. It's think of all the times when you think some more staunch authoritarian immigrant would say, "No, this isn't the way we did it in the old country." The Irfan Khan, the father, says several times, "Well, this is how they do things here."
Yeah,
and even the first day there, he makes tea for her, which is unheard of in India, right? And he said, "This is the American way."
I mean, their background, they're obviously relatively well educated. I don't know what caste they're supposed to be in their home country. They didn't really address that in any specific way, but obviously they're both literate, and their own parents were literate, clearly. Okay, yes. So there's a strong educational component to all this. So anyways, I liked it.
Everybody in the movie was a Brahmin except for the servants, I would say.
Because they had servants?
No, because they had the red markings.
Oh, the dot is okay.
Yeah. I wanted to say I like this movie a lot. It meant something to me special because I had the experience of living as a graduate student with two different roommates, both of whom were Bengalis. And, we got to know each other fairly well. And I learned a little bit about their culture. And something going on. And also the movie brings me back to the movie Pather Panchali.
Yes, the Apu trilogy.
Yeah, the Apu, and which I saw maybe about, I'm trying to figure it out, probably about 2 years after it came out, about 50 years ago. And I've always felt that a very great feeling for that movie. And then all three of those, and also another Satyajit Ray film that I like called The Music Room. And the music, in that case, it was Ravi Shankar, but this movie had great music, although I hated the loud rock that I guess was in there for a reason, but it really bothered me.
Yeah. Howard, do you or anyone else want to get into the Apu trilogy and what it means to Indian cinema culture? That we don't have to get too geeky here, but
I just read up a little bit about it, and it's considered to be some of the greatest cinema, not certainly the greatest cinema of Bengali culture and the Indian culture. And also even, of all movies of the 20th century. And it really is wonderful, especially Pather Panchali, which this movie was really, was obviously echoing Pather Panchali. In fact, I caught it in the credits at the end. They mentioned Pather Panchali and they mentioned Satyajit Ray. So I didn't quite have a chance to read exactly what they said about it, but she was obviously thinking about it. The movie had the same sort of low-key mood, and the guy was the same kind of guy. The father, not the son, who was sort of a twerp, but the father was just a very fine person. who unfortunately died early.
The
let's
film was
talk about
dedicated.
him and the mother too. Everybody said she was so strong.
Yeah.
These people were remarkably resilient, and they seemed to tolerate the intrusion of the new culture into their personal lives and didn't take it. I mean, they were personally hurt, but they knew how to survive the newness that their children brought into the family.
Well, they knew what they were in for. They consciously knew that they were leaving.
Well, but they didn't know the details. They didn't know the reality of it.
But they knew it was going to be, it was explicit, you're going to be cold and lonely, and this country is very different from what you're used to.
Right. But, he wouldn't have been, the young man wouldn't have been teased for having the name Gogol in India, whereas he was terribly teased for it in America, but managed to cope with it. But there's this great line that Ashok says. He says, in America, children choose their own names. And it goes back to this notion of identity, that you create your own identity in America. And we have to allow for this, so we won't be comfortable.
More or less don't have arranged marriages, although in this case, it was sort of borderline that it was sort of arranged.
Sort of. We'll get back to that topic. I think Cindy, Cindy first, and then Stephen.
Why can't you just?
Stephen,
talking about identity, I think most of us have ancestors where the old country name was changed when they came through Ellis Island to anglicize it. But my uncle, we were given the name Cantor, and my uncle was a lawyer in 1939, could not get a job in New York as a lawyer being Jewish. So half the family changed their name to Kent, and he got a job. And so the identity to not have an identifiable Jewish name for half the family happened. And my father changed his name from Jacob to Jack. And
very common.
There is that option. They did it as adults.
Right. And I've told this story before about Mayor Tom Bradley, the first Black mayor of Los Angeles. And early in his mayoral career, a reporter said, how come Blacks have had so much trouble assimilating and the Jews and the Germans and the Italians didn't? And Bradley just looked at the guy dumbstruck and said, color, baby. It's like, we could do this because we were white. Let's face it. And
well, now they Google you.
Well, of course, but I mean, since the 1880s, Jews have done extremely well in this country because they could be mistaken for white people, and they are white. Excuse me, I don't want to kick off a world linguistic war here, but it was even Indignation, the Philip Roth film adaptation that we saw. It's all about passing or not passing, and finding out who you really are. And that's what makes these movies so interesting. Each culture has its own spin, its own lens on it, and they're not that different, but they are different to enjoy when you see them in a movie. Steve, did you have something?
No, I did.
In terms of your original question about whether the movie related to immigration experience in my own family, I would say no, because these immigrants were actually pretty well off when they arrived. He had a place to live. He had a full-time job. He was able to support her. She didn't have to work. When my parents, my mother was born in Poland, came at the age of 7 as the oldest of 3 children. Everybody worked in the business. Her parents bought a grocery store, and she continued working, I think, for her parents' grocery business until she was in her early teens. So their economic circumstances, which had not been bad at all in Poland, they were quite well off, actually. They were restricted on what they could bring. So they started at a much lower economic level than this particular family. The other thing, someone talked about the ease of assimilation. They surrounded themselves with other Indians. So they lived in an Indian bubble in the US. The kid may have been teased in school, but it was obvious that their Not that there's anything unusual about this. I mean, you know, the Italians came to Brooklyn, they lived with Italians. The Jews came to the Lower East Side, they lived with Jews. The same with the Greeks, the Chinese, every other group. But I thought they had definitely found a substantial Indian community to relate to.
They did, although the suburb, the film did not say that the suburb they lived in was Indian. It was very mixed. Remember, there was graffiti on the mailbox when they came back from their India trip. So it's not like this was Muncie or, you know, or or Westminster in LA where Vietnamese people have congregated. Natalie?
Well, there was one, for me, such a touching part of the film when her husband dies and she is standing in front of the hospital. And that is why I did not see it as she had integrated with a lot of Indian friends and people. To me, that one scene there showed how alone she was. Her children were off other places. She was by herself dealing with this horrible situation to find out the shock of her husband dying at such a young age. And that was in contrast to when they take the children, when her father died, and they take the children back to India. And these American kids now are making fun of the fact that they had to go from one family to the next family, to the next family, to the next family, how everybody knew everybody's business, how everybody was into one another. So as an American growing up, we like our isolation. We let our children go free at very early. Get yourself your own apartment, do this, do that, go away, experience everything. But in India, they hold on to their children and the families. And I thought that was a terrific example of a big difference in the cultures when you could stand back and say, I'm not so sure which one is better.
Okay, I think the scene you're referring to is not outside. She never went to the hospital. The son goes there to identify him. She was outside her own house, sort of looking for him.
Was that outside that? Well,
yeah.
Okay, I thought she had gone by herself.
But you're right.
She's still by herself. Right?
She's by herself. That's the end feeling, the wide shot in front of the house, and then she finally sobs.
That was a strong point.
Yeah. Oh, right. Enid, please, Enid, Enid, you're muted. Please unmute yourself. Lower left corner. Can't hear you yet. Enid, there's a box with a red microphone there. Well, can't do it, huh? Okay, we can't hear you, so you have to figure out, there's a little microphone at the bottom left of your screen. You have to click on that so we can hear you.
You can also just press the space bar and talk.
Or press the space bar. Can you do that? Oh, now yes. You're live.
Now,
okay.
Sorry about this. I'm on my iPad, so I sometimes have a problem. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. But I totally agree with Natalie. And when his wife did not go, to the hospital, and her son went and more or less identified the body, and it just made me cry. This movie was such a heartfelt, wonderful movie. I cried a lot. And good. I mean, especially at the end. That's why, I actually joined in. But I thought it was a wonderful one. Okay. And Natalie, I totally agree with you.
Right. But Enid, let me ask you, your sure. tears at the death of the husband, were they different from your tears at the very end? And how so? What were you crying for at the end?
I was crying for the son, because what happened to his wife, she had an affair with actually Pierre. And yeah, but it was just the whole thing came together, and the wife came into her own. And that's what I was crying for. but I thought, well, she did it. Maybe that's why her husband left her alone, or he wanted her to come with him, but she didn't want to.
You're right, but I wanted to point out that those are two very different kinds of sadness.
Yes.
You were joyful for her at the end
Yes.
and sad for her. The film does that. It's a good film, you know, because it can do that.
But there's a parallel that I thought with, you know, the Jewish Shiva versus everybody, you know, gathering, together. And I mean, I think it's a wonderful family. My family was actually like that in St. Louis, and I'm the only one out here, and I do miss it. So
sure.
I thought it was a heartfelt movie. I thought it was wonderful.
Several of us have mentioned the Shiva scene. And let's just talk about costuming. Did anybody's costume stand out to you? Cindy, I can see you laughing already. You're muted, Cindy.
I guess in today's day, the girlfriend could have Googled what to wear because everybody was white. But, you know, in America, traditionally, you wear black.
Right.
It was a big contrast that in her black dress opposed to everyone in the white Indian outfit. That was really poignant for me.
Yeah. And it's interesting that other cultures too, the Amish culture in Pennsylvania and Ohio, you're buried in a white shroud, as many Jewish people are. It's a symbol of purity and the soul ascending, and you know, you've reached that stage of a pure existence. Risa?
Excuse me, may I just say, my husband is watching above. He's right here with me. He's been gone a long time. I can't even imagine. I would be crying the whole time. I didn't see it, but I remember sitting Shiva, and my little girl was 2, and she climbed up on the chair and she said, "Mommy, Daddy coming home for dinner." So I was just listening to all of this. And the lady with the flower, you're amazing. I just love the flower in the background. It just makes me.
That's you, Cindy. Good. Well, we're glad it's affecting you. Risa, did you have something to say?
I just want to say that the wearing of white is very important in the Indian culture, particularly in the Hindu part of the culture. They wear white at services, for example, on Yom Kippur. The entire congregation, all the women are in white saris. And I want to also mention that the Bengali community in India keeps itself separate. The Bengali community celebrates together, supports one another. I was in my good friends have a Calcutta background, but they took us to a Bengali event for I'm going to mess up the Indian holiday of Diwali. Somebody, yeah, I words are hard for me. Say it again.
Diwali.
It begins with a D, but anyway.
Diwali.
Oh, Diwali. Okay, whatever. It doesn't matter.
I love this lady.
The point is that I went to the Bengali celebration, which happened to be on Yom Kippur. And what we did is we went to services Erev Yom Kippur, Kol Nidre, and then we went to the Bengali festival celebration, and it was a community of 10,000 people. And they were doing dances, which were absolutely the horror, without question. And so I joined in, and I didn't know that there was some special thing about a foreigner, non-Indian, participating. And they passed me through the crowd of 10,000 people, Stanley and my son Ron following me, running all the way to the front. I got put up on the stage, and I'm dancing like crazy with this music and everything, and found out that I was on Mumbai television, seen by the entire congregation. But the Bengali community is very, very close, and therefore I didn't feel the aloneness of her. I knew that she would be immediately surrounded, and she went home to that surrounding as well. So I just thought it was fabulous. But anyway, I'm prejudiced.
I think Melanie has her hand up. Unmute, Melanie. Unmute yourself. Nope.
All right. Okay. I did. All right. First of all, Michael and I, we really enjoyed the movie. I think I enjoyed it the most of the ones we've watched. So My connection is we lived in Westminster in Orange County, and I worked at the Hebrew Academy, which is a Chabad day school. So I identified with a lot of it. We probably went to 50 weddings over 29 years or more. The Chabad are arranged marriages and a very close, tight-knit community. I felt, I don't know exactly why, but a lot of these marriages could be, the groom could be from Los Angeles and the bride could be from Spain. They're usually connected really, really far away. So I see when they do get married, that even though we have a Chabad, they often make new friends. It's a whole totally different country sometimes. So a lot of connection with that. And Michael's going to talk about the weddings because we've been to so many weddings. So he wants to tell you what he thought about the wedding in the movie. And then the last thing I wanted to say, I think it's kind of ironic because Google now is like something that we talk about. It wasn't exactly his name and we didn't do Google then, but there's a lot of similarities in the pronunciation. So I'm going to let Michael talk to you about the Chabad wedding connected to the wedding for India. All right, talk about it.
Yes, I had the good fortune of being invited to these weddings, and they allowed me to bring my camera, which was similar to the one that was used in the movie. In the process of going to to a number of these weddings, I knew at what point it was important to get the picture, such as when the orchestra or the Kashmir orchestra would come out. Klezmer orchestra would come out, the circling of the groom 7 times, of course, the breaking of then the unveiling of the bride, and then, of course, the breaking of the glass, and then the celebration in the grooms where they separated the groom's party on the men on one side and the women on another side. So I would be taking all these pictures. And what I would do is the weddings were held during the week, and I would get the pictures developed before the weekend. And then I would buy a little album and put all the pictures in it that I felt were relevant. And then I would take it over to their house or apartment, wherever they were staying, and I leave it on their doorstep. But by doing that, if it was on a Saturday, they wouldn't pick up the album. I had to call them the following day on Sunday and ask them, did they get the album? And they say, then they would ask what album, where, and they'd finally go out and discover the album. But it was really important to them because a lot of these people were emissaries and they were going to be sent to different parts of the world. So at least they'd have their wedding pictures to take them with them to see them, because you saw the costumes and the decorations that the Hindu women had. So that's what I felt the similarity was.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Mona, your hand is still raised? No, Steve? No? All right. Since we're all quiet for a second, Steve, did you want to say something? Steve Zimmerman?
No, not at the moment.
Okay.
I could, but I wasn't planning on it.
Well, let me talk about some of the turning points in the films. First, when they go to the Taj Mahal, it's a beautiful sequence.
Beautiful.
Just beautiful. And having never been there, I knew it was beautiful, but it's the first time I felt the beauty of it, both in that wide shot as well as the spinning ceilings, and how in the past, my own personal bias was that a lot of over decoration is clutter, but suddenly in this film, it made sense to me again. It's a very delicate kind of beauty. And then his decision to become an architect after that, again, that goes back to this cultural inheritance thing. He's feeling deeply about the roots of his culture, even if he's not a religious person. And he does follow through on that. So you know, there's this thread in him, in Gogol. He knows who he is. He connects with who he is. He just gets off the rails a little bit. And back in America, shortly after that, he says, I want to change my name or something. And he says, well, anything is possible in America. You can do what you want. It's another sign of strength from the dad, that he's not insulted. I mean, how many parents railed against their kids because they wanted to ride a motorcycle or smoke cigarettes or worse, or, you know, go out with a non-Jewish girl? He says, well, you know, you're going to write your own story here. This is what America's all about. And, you know, it's just a kind of a little flippant moment, but the father doesn't make a big deal of it because he's kind of a low-key guy anyway, but he feels deeply. And that brings me back to the Apu trilogy, which Howard referred to. This is an iconic set of 3 films by Satyajit Ray about village life as it's been lived for centuries in India. And it's an icon of naturalistic storytelling in film, where nothing is hyper dramatized, but the performances and the settings go very deep. They're very authentic. Pace is slow. You're meant to immerse yourself in the lives these people lived. And the trilogy follows a young boy through adulthood, through his adulthood as a writer. And one of my students is Indian, and of course, he says he has revered that forever. And even some of my Chinese students have said that as well. It's really a landmark in naturalistic storytelling. And if you look at the films, not just this one, but The Lunchbox or Photograph, remember we saw Photograph a year ago about the lower caste guy trying to win over this middle caste woman, and his grandmother comes to town, and she sort of is this comic relief, but she changes everything. And it's about slowly these two people coming to realize how love might be possible. There's this inherent, and Risa, maybe you want to chime in, but I kind of, maybe I romanticize an Indian sensibility, although it relates to the Japanese sensibility as well, which we'll get into in a couple more months, in the films I've picked, of this profound understanding of life and this feeling, even though it's not openly and overtly expressed. It's there, as we say in America, the subtext, an undercurrent, which is as fully lived as what we see on the surface. So this film, I mean, the book was written by a Barnard graduate, and Mira Nair is an Indian filmmaker, lives here now, works here, quite an intelligent woman, a great spokesman for women directors. These cultures have brought to American cinema an example, even if they didn't affect us that much until recently, a tradition of honesty and naturalism and authenticity that you don't need a star for, you know, because the story and the performances and the fully felt experience of the performers is so convincing. We just go with them. And I'm always amazed at the skill of these directors and actors to pull us in. As many of you have said by your reactions here, we were totally with them. Okay, let's move on. And then midway through the film, this is interesting. At the halfway point, we finally realize what the meaning of Gogol's name is. And it's interesting that Dad had, you know, he can't tell him when he gives him a book by Gogol at his graduation ceremony from high school. Just can't quite get there because the son he's high and he's dancing to the music. And, you know, it's a scene that we've seen before in films, and maybe you've experienced yourself. I never did, fortunately. But he can't bring himself to face this moment. And then halfway through the film, he tells us that Gogol was a gift, you know, and shortly after that, the dad dies, and the son, going through the belongings in the home, rediscovers this book he never read. And that's his deep dive, going back into Gogol, but also into his father's identity. So this happens after the death and the funeral service, when he shaves his head, but when Maxine comes to visit him and talks to him after the service, she's trying to be this loving, supportive American girlfriend. Let's go away together. I'll take your mind off all of this. And what does he say? He says, I don't want to leave all of this. It's terribly painful, but he's realizing that this is not an obligation, but it's a part of himself he can't ignore. And he's beginning to accept. And that's what's so great about his transformation there. Maxine was his shiksa goddess, right? Many of us guys may have had them. I did. My brother married one. And believe me, my parents were not kind. And this is why it related so much to my own background. My oldest brother married a Presbyterian woman of French extraction. It was very, I thought, nice person at that time. I got away from high school so I could be a witness in the judges' quarters for their wedding because my mother refused to go to a church. Of course, that refused the bride a church wedding, which she had always wanted. At any rate, I won't go into that part of my family saga, but the point is that there's a disconnect there, that my brother in many ways spent his life running away from his past. He passed as WASP because he was so smart and such a great legal mind and did extremely well in his law career, and was somewhat happy with it. He liked the prestige. He liked doing a good job for the clients, even if they were on the wrong side of the ecological fence, but he didn't know it. It was too many decades ago. And a lot of people do this. A lot of my father came here at 5. My mother was born in Cleveland. But a lot of newly arrived immigrant children sort of run away from their heritage the way Gogol did. He ran away from his name, right? He cut his hair. He looked differently. He was in a WASPy architectural firm.
Oh, wait a minute. His name was not Indian. His name was Russian.
I'm sorry, but he was Nick. He was not Nikhil.
No,
he was Nick.
Well,
yes, Gogol is Russian.
Yeah, and his first name, Nikolai, is Gogol's first name. The author.
Nikolai Gogol.
Nikolai
Gogol. We know that.
Yeah,
but
his
given
name was Nikhil.
Nikhil.
And everyone called him Nick.
And there's a line, the aunt or something. The aunt in the suburbs says, "Oh, that's good. People will call him Nick." And sure enough, that's how he skirted that divide. That was a form of his assimilation. I mean, really, but that's what we're talking about, how the children are tempted away from the old country. No, we don't wear payas anymore or fur hats in summer. Not that our relatives did either, but that's not who we are. And some of our families never were, although some may have been Hasidic. We're Americanized Jews. Growing up in Cleveland, which I don't know if you know this, was the largest Jewish population outside of New York until the river caught fire in 1974. And as it should have, because it was filled with oil slicks and chemicals. But it was this huge community, mostly living on the east side. Talk about clusters of where the Jews lived. It was in the newer post-war suburbs. In my junior high school, they had to close it because so many of the teachers are Jewish. None of them showed up for work. I don't know if it was that way in the rest of the school system, which was not as Jewish, but was the older suburb that we shared a school system with. So we see these patterns repeated in culture after culture and city after city, and it's just fascinating. But I bring up my own family story because Gogol's parents were far more accepting and understanding of the dominant culture. My parents, although they were in a way fully assimilated, were also very entrenched in the households they grew up in. Kosher homes, Orthodox parents. Both my grandparents walked to the same shul. It was a big one in Cleveland. Stan Davids will know this. It was Taylor Road Synagogue, where his father's deli was located within walking distance. Our family lives revolved around their homes, where we met and played with our cousins mostly. But granted, this was 1977, the 80s, when Ashok realizes we're an American now. This is what you do. You reinvent yourself. So I admired him for his strength of being able to say, as he says to his wife, You want your child to have all the opportunities possible. If you do, we have to stay here. And that sort of ends that argument in their lives. And please chime in if anything, as we move through the movie, anything strikes you. I'm pointing out what connected me so much. There's a great shot in the Shiva service where his head is shaved, he's wearing white robes, and the first shot of him, he's bowing in prayer. And she sees this. It's her point of view of him. And her face changes after that. And she doesn't know it because she tries to be the appreciative American girlfriend later on in his bedroom. But the die is cast there. We know it, from her black dress to his being like she's never seen him before. And she sees it as a weakness, that you'll get past all this. And he says, no, I don't want to get past all this. This is part of who I am. And the loss is part of who I am. And she says, I think I don't know you anymore. Not the best lines to say goodbye on anymore. Oh, your cat's smiling at us, Risa. It's the first time she's looked at the screen. Usually we just see the other end. So let's move on. So I'm saying in my own family, this played out where one of the children pursues the other, partly to be accepted, we were in a higher socioeconomic status than my brother's wife, but it didn't matter. She became a very obedient law wife for 40 years or more. Susie, did you have a comment?
I do have a comment. I want to move on just a little bit. I do not remember the name of his second significant other that he married. What was her name?
Mushama, something like that.
Mushama. I felt that it was very rushed. The relationship in the film didn't let us feel like there was any time between his father dying, his saying goodbye to
the first date,
one, Blondie, and meeting Mushan. She was wonderful. I was happy that it happened. And then the other thing that
You're such a yenta.
The other thing, I have two things about that. Was he on the rebound, number one? Was he so anxious because his father died to really like Mushan a lot? And thirdly, I did not think she anywhere near looked like the girl in the first couple of scenes of the movie when she comes to the house and it's supposed to be a match. Was she supposed to be the same girl?
Yes. Yes, she was the same
But
girl.
Did they even resemble each other? It's like she had a whole body makeover.
Well, you're so right.
We went to
There was nothing. I even went back and looked at the beginning of the movie.
That's called acting and makeup and wardrobe.
I love it. I love it.
They needed to get a person that looked more in the first scene.
No.
Okay.
Here's the thing. Even he noted, he doesn't recognize her. He says, when did you get to be so sexy?
Really? I mean,
he doesn't recognize.
5,000 pounds. She must have been on the.
She's sitting down in a chair.
No, wait a minute. She was very, very young when they were first making the match, which can happen in India. She could have been no more than 18, could have been 17. And then she grew up. She grew up, but the families were close. He knew her and he always knew her. But in an arranged marriage, it doesn't take more than 5 minutes to make the decision.
Well, okay, then move to my next point. Did anybody else feel like it happened so fast?
It did.
It does.
Okay,
Susie, well, I actually think this is one of the things where I think because he knew her so long and she'd been part of this community, and he turned out he liked her, the ending wasn't a surprise. I think he thought that she would maintain the culture that he was returning to. And that was way behind her. She was a fully Western woman who was not what he thought he would be getting if he went back and married someone from his own culture.
Yeah.
He
Arranged
deluded
marriages,
himself.
the arranged
But when it
brides
didn't
never
work,
looked that
It
good.
was from the culture.
When they had tea together for the first time, there's a series of close-ups of parts of her body, mostly her neck, her lips, and the third shot is clearly, and then you cut back to him and he's mesmerized by the close-up we've just seen of her. So there's a lot of heat going on there. But I think you're right, Steve. He'd never imagined a Bengali woman could be this hot. So he's totally smitten. But it goes deeper than that because
No, I don't think it's how she looked. I think that despite how she looked, he thought he would be marrying someone who maintained a lot of their culture and lifestyle and all of that.
It was both. Okay, it was both.
But he got the whole package, you know. But it does come quickly on the tail of the father's death. And that's because he shaved his head. He's rediscovering his roots. He goes back to the river or the ocean to scatter his ashes in that beautiful ceremony.
Bring up something else entirely.
What's that, Yvette?
Yeah, what I'd like to question and get other people's thoughts on is how I think he had a lot of guilt for treating his mother so poorly, and she couldn't even reach him when his father died, and his sister had to reach him. And I think that caused an awful lot of guilt, which the movie sort of ignores.
It does. It comes through when he breaks up with Maxine. He says, I have a lot of regrets. He's beginning to realize and feel shame for not respecting his mother, you know, not honoring the connection, and by pursuing his bride-to-be's American family.
So his bride-to-be was really an assault against his family.
Yes, as my parents felt my brother was doing to them. He was doing it despite them. You know, they take it very personally. How can you reject me by not marrying a nice Jewish girl? You're rejecting all our hopes and dreams for you. I mean, it's so pan-cultural, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, why can't you marry someone like yourself? And somebody referred to arranged marriages. There's a reason why so many of them work out. Part of it is the cultural background. Among the Hasids, it's like this devotion to the lifestyle and the community. Yeah. Among others, it's like after X number of years or decades, you learn to love each other. And these things, like she said, I learned to love my husband in America. She didn't know him before. And granted, there was lots to love about him. And he helped navigate her way through America, but she had her own strengths there as well. But it's who you share your life with. And frankly, I think Gogol was lucky to discover Moshe. By the way, the change, Susie, she was post-Pierre, right?
Yes.
Pierre was the boyfriend from France.
Yes.
And that's what made the change in her. She became more worldly. So the transformation and the difference between them was meant to be shocking and
you know
extreme.
What? She was, I mean, look at how she acted at the wedding. I thought she was in love and happy to be with her own people and the whole thing.
She was on the rebound too. You have to understand. I forget who said rebound. Enid, I guess. Yeah. He very much was on the rebound from depression over his father and from Maxine, and running into the arms of a Bengali woman seemed to solve a lot of problems. One, she was beautiful, so that was okay with him. Two, it pleased the whole family, and they could go through with the wedding. And for her as well, she's getting over Pierre. So, you know, two people on the rebound is a very dangerous combination. And they proved it so. I think where the movie falls down is that Pierre never becomes a real force in her life. It's all hearsay,
right? But
off camera.
She went back to him anyway, and that was the reason.
Yeah, but we wanted to see the why. We don't really know the why. I mean, it's a lack of character development.
I have a cultural question. Maybe you or Ruxin know the answer. Is it the Bengali segment of the Indian people that do all that painting, the women that paint their faces and paint their
They all
nose and their legs and everything?
They all do it. They all do it. It's what the pattern is that makes the difference. But they all do it.
Really?
It's the henna. It's henna.
Henna. It's called
Yeah,
henna.
both the bride and the groom
wash
have
out?
red dots
Right.
painted on.
Right.
And,
Well,
and the beading on the face. The face beading must have a
that's
local
cultural.
significance.
Right. Right.
Local culture. I mean, there's so many different
No, but
ethnicities.
she had her feet and her legs were painted.
That's right. And the palms.
And her palms.
That's all part of it. And the Jewish community does it also. The Jewish
Really?
community. Oh yeah, they do the henna. They.
Oh, in India, you're saying?
Oh,
I
in
mean,
India, in India.
yeah.
Yeah, they have mixed the cultures, and their weddings are also 5 days. They don't do in today's world. They don't do arranged marriages, but the entire community meets on the pier for tashlik, and the girls who are interested in meeting somebody are fully dressed beautifully in these saris, and the boys are also, and the parents meet each other, and the shidduch is made on the pier. On the pier, they meet each other, and then they get together.
So
Yes!
the parents don't know each other either.
Wait a minute. The community is total of 3,500 people.
I see.
They know everybody. Everybody knows everybody.
I see.
100%. So that's what happens. And, they may get married or they may not get married, but that's where they plan to meet their spouse.
It's kind of a crowd frenzy, huh?
It's fabulous.
Sadie Hawkins Day.
Exactly. It's absolutely fabulous.
That's
We
where
have the time of our lives on the pier.
All right, let's go back. But again, this process through the film, the death of the father, the realization that Maxine is never going to fulfill him, going out on the date and realizing, oh, maybe there's a Bengali woman who might fulfill him and please the family. It's like, oh,
wait, that was arranged. That didn't happen by accident. That was arranged. The grandparents
they
put it
ran
out.
with it on their own. They said, call her if you want. And he did. And then he has tea with her, and then they have
that's right
a single malt and a martini, and he's looking at her neck and her lips, and he says,
yes,
this arrangement isn't too bad right
that's
now.
Not bad. That's
so it's like,
how many times did you watch that scene, Jim?
Not enough.
That's
I've seen the movie 3-4 times, but only twice in the last month.
Especially the lips.
No, that's not my favorite part. But I mean, but this is, we're watching whole humans form themselves, and the younger ones carry with them a big part of Bengal, and also who they are in American schools and universities and workplaces is who they are, and who she was in Paris. If she'd gotten that offer to teach at the Sorbonne, she never would have left Pierre, probably. So life takes funny turns, and what we're seeing is how the background, the cultural identity sort of pushes us in various directions, some well chosen, some not so well chosen, but it's a force in our lives that we have to deal with. I don't even know what time it is because I'm not wearing my watch. What time? It's 8:36. We have so much time. And then there's this notion of, I want to save the notion of freedom for the end, but there's a very important scene when he and Mushima are at a very swank, Upper East Side cocktail gathering among millennial friends. And she announces he changed his name. And this is a flashpoint between them, right? Because she knows, he knows, but it was something he thought was quite private because it hadn't been an identity he was choosing to embrace at that point in his life. And, one of the white American friends says, oh, I get it. Nikolai Gogol, Nick, that's how you got your name. And he's just seething. He said, yeah, he's seething with anger, and he takes it out on her in the car. And that's it for them. It's done. The relationship's over. But this being unmasked, he's at a point where he can't accept that he's wrong for a second time. He was wrong about her. He's in very deep there with his own conflicts, with his own identity. And so there's this notion of freedom that both he and his mother feel at the end. Does anybody want to take on his first, this notion of freedom? He's talking to his mother, and she says, oh, no, I can't go to India anymore because you need me here. You're alone. And he says, no, I feel free for the first time. Because he's free of the Shiksa goddess, and he's free of the Shidduch, right? He can be his own man now because he knows who he is, and he knows that he's Bengali, and he knows that he's American. He's done it in a way. He's done it all. I mean, that's his arc. He's not bounced from. I don't want to say bounced from two extremes, but he's made his exploration and he's learned from it. And we don't see him carrying out his freedom very well at the end. Mona?
I was just going to say that I loved the fact that the mother literally discovers her own voice. She makes the decision to live 6 months a year in the US and be back in India for 6 months, and she returns to the singing the classical singing that she had studied as a young woman. And she's clearly acknowledging her own needs, recognizing her own loneliness and love of family. And I thought there's a beautiful shot of her parents looking at the snapshot with their daughter and son-in-law and the little baby, and you can tell that everybody misses each other so deeply. I thought one of the most wonderful things about the movie was that they're just these passing shots of people often looking at art or looking at pictures or something, and you know exactly how they feel without a word being said, that they're so far apart. So I thought he did not strike me as a particularly mature person with a lot of self-insight. So I think he has plenty of growing to do. His parents were much more mature people, I thought, even at the young age that he is at the end of the movie. His parents started even younger than that, and they already were older in many ways. But someone earlier said that they found the mother the most moving. So did I. I thought she was just a fantastic, extremely resilient, very well-developed character. And I was so happy for her that she achieved some of her own dreams. She was a very responsible person. She was always doing her duty and looking out for other people. And finally, at the end, she was looking out for herself.
Right. And well, that's motherhood all over the world,
Yes. Yeah.
And it's true. That was her freedom. And that slight smile she gives to her teacher at the end is just gorgeous. It's like you just feel, okay, she's arrived, And you're right. He's a bit of a cipher at the end. We don't know what's going to happen to him. But when you were speaking, I thought of, we've all thought of our own children at some point in this movie. And you think, oh, they're so much more sophisticated than we were at that age, but they're not as wise. You probably had that feeling that maybe we sheltered them too much, or maybe we tried to explain it all too soon and didn't let them learn it all on their own. Like our parents learned it on their own. There were no self-help classes, pre or post-war America, at least, unless you were an Upper West Side fan of ethical culture or a psychiatrist family. That's just my bad joke. Sorry if I offended anybody. Risa got it. Any other comments on the film? Anyone want to chime in? Anything resonated?
I don't know if you can hear me. I'm not showing up on the screen at all. This is Arlene.
Arlene Warchel, yes. Hi.
No, Arlene Schwimmer.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Arlene.
That's
yeah,
okay.
I screwed up with the cameras. It won't happen.
Okay, but I just wanted to say that I really thought this film, besides being terrific, I loved it. It couldn't have been done by a male director. I really want to give her, Mira Noor, the credit that she deserves for doing this film. There were so many interesting nuances or parts of it that I really felt that it was a woman's hand who did it. I'm thinking right now of the first love scene, the first physical touching of the new husband and wife. It was done so beautifully, so touchingly, so sensitively. I feel like the director really should be credited for that whole atmosphere. I thought you did a great job.
There's another film I did not see, but it's about a Black African girl who becomes a chess master.
Right.
Queen of something, Michael? Do you
Queen's Gambit. It's wonderful. Film.
No.
Queen
No,
of
different movie.
Katwe.
I'll get the title. I know what you're
Queen
talking
of
about.
Katwe.
Queen of Katwe. Yes.
KATWE.
Yeah. This also did two films that you may have seen. Shakespeare, something Masala, and another film with an Indian title, but done in English.
Mississippi Masala?
Mississippi Masala, right.
Yeah.
That's a very early film of hers. She's a very smart woman working in New York now, and really always someone to watch, whatever she does. All right, let's, if nobody has any other, Steve, go ahead.
Just a couple things. The theme is a kind of a universal theme. It's Hamlet. Okay, I mean, it's to thine own self be true. And the story and the saga from beginning to end is people wading their way through layers of confusion, of cultural assimilation and traditionalism, and all this confusion as they grow and develop and go through these ups and downs of relationships. At the end of the day, they're each striving to find their own inner self, what's the most comfortable fit for them as a human being. And so it's a very classic and universal kind of thing.
Universal, yeah.
The only other observation right now I would make is that I do feel the film got kind of rushed in the last 45 minutes. To me, there was a certain pace and a tempo for most of the movie. And then it's like the director realized she's got a whole lot of stuff to get through. The relationships came and went fast. There were all these, major punches happening with the relationships up and down. It's a little flawed in that regard, I thought, but nonetheless, well done overall.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say, I want to check Nirna Moya out on her films.
Mira Nair.
Mira
Nair. And do see this film. It's, don't take my word for it. It's really, it will resonate with you. It really.
I will say that I think Jewish men make the best husbands in the whole world. I know from experience. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, my wife had two, and I'm the keeper, so that should tell you. Listen, I don't believe this. How many Nobel Prizes there were for Jewish people. It's like nobody has a patent or on being a mensch, right? Anybody can do it, and there are plenty of non-Jewish mensches out there in history. And so I'm a little uncomfortable because I like to keep an open mind about things, but I can't help it if, some Jewish woman loves me. Yeah.
I just stuck this in the chat, but it turns out that the director's husband is named Mitch Epstein.
Okay, so she has taste too.
That's cool.
I didn't know that. And how about this Black woman educator, Miriam Edelman? What's her last name? It's a hyphenated name.
Right.
Who married a Jewish man. Somebody must know.
Marianne Wright Edelman.
Right, Marianne Wright Edelman. And their son did the OJ series, which is a profound meditation on being Black in America. I don't know what he's done since, but you see there's something particular. I've always felt a particular kinship with Indian culture. I don't know why. I've never been there. But those of us who've traveled, oh my God, you make a connection with somebody in a foreign country, and it's like the world opens up to you. You realize how insular you were in your own life because you never knew these people existed, and suddenly they're as vibrant to you as people you grew up with, because of the connection you had. It's this whole point of sharing work or sharing a trauma with somebody abroad. Yes, Steve. Steve Zimmerman?
I'm sorry.
You were pulling your sleeve.
Lower my hand. Sorry.
Yvette, your hand is up in the chat. No? You're muted too. Okay, so if you have nothing to say. So let's move on. I want to make sure that everybody knows about next Wednesday night. We're going to have one Wednesday night a month, hopefully with a guest. Although this one will not be with a guest. Rabbi Nanus and I talked about this, and she said because of the recent unrest in Israel, wouldn't it be appropriate if we had a film that dealt with the Palestinian-Israeli conflict? So as some of you heard me say this morning, it's the true story of a world-famous conductor, Daniel Barenboim, who sort of retired from active conducting, but is approached by a cultural minister in the Israeli cabinet or under minister to create a Palestinian-Israeli youth orchestra from accomplished musicians. Risa, you saw this several months ago and you raved about it, right? And he pulls them together, but there are obvious frictions between them. They're competitive musically, and they have their own biases. So he puts them through a kind of very rigorous encounter training. Those of you who've been to encounter therapy or skilled psychologists who have learned about group techniques, where you encourage people to face their own demons and their biases in front of others. And being in a group and sharing this experience together really brings out a lot of personal demons as well as understanding. And the middle part of this movie is devoted to his attempts, non-musical attempts, to bring these kids together. They're like late teenagers, early 20s. And they received so much scorn in Israel for their rehearsing together for a big concert they're going to give in Europe, that they moved them to a small town in rural Italy. And they try and do their work there. And there's a tragedy that happens that is sort of made less tragic by the music they can make together. But it's very telling, and the psychology of the individual players, the young people, is really it's eye-opening, and it's fair to the genuine feelings of both peoples. I have a friend who used to mediate between Israeli and Palestinian negotiators years ago, and she finally gave up on it. But she said the only thing that will bring people together is if they see each other as a human being and feel their pain and acknowledge that there's something you can share. Risa, do you want to chime in because of your experience of living there?
I just want to make
relative
sure
to that movie.
I just want to make sure people watch it without the word racist in your mind. It's not racism at all between the Israelis and the Palestinians. It's all about land and land ownership and not skin color.
Okay, good. Of course, this is a hot raving issue here, especially in America, where Jews are divided. And everybody's called a racist, no matter which side you're on. So it's a film that will hold your attention. I won't rave about it the way I do about this one, but there's lots there for us to discuss. And, there's some growth that we can carry away with it. After that, I really want you to see this other film that's, I believe, the last Saturday of this month. It's on the 26th. No, yeah, the 26th, called Winter Journey. Who saw The Tobacconist, that kind of gauzy, sentimental? Well, there's a reason I didn't show it. Sorry, Risa, if you disagree.
I do disagree.
Okay. Well, the man who plays Freud in that, Bruno Ganz, is a very distinguished European actor. And he plays an American, a German Jew who was a musician, as was his wife, in Germany, who fled at the last minute and wound up in traveling around the country for various years, playing for local symphonies. And he finally settles in Florida as a widower, and his son comes to interview him. You never see the son, but you hear the son ask the father's question. So it's all like a news camera, news gathering situation where the man is constantly being interviewed. There is a sequence of flashbacks to the hometown, a small town in Germany where the man was from. And the son's main question is, how come you never spoke about your past in Germany? And how come you never spoke about the family you left behind? All of his family perished in the camps. And the dad evades that question for the whole movie. It's remarkable. You'll watch it for 20 minutes and you'll think it's a documentary. Bruno Ganz is just that good. And the touch of the filmmaker is that sensitive to being true to the conceit. He doesn't push anything hard at all. But the guy behind the camera grows increasingly agitated, as children can do with you while challenging you on your life from their perspective. And I found this a fascinating film, largely because it's the first film that demonstrates the longing of the second generation survivors to understand their parents more. And it also explains the parents, the survivors' hesitancy to share their trauma with future generations. It's not like either side is right or wrong, but the point is you can feel what's driving both of them. And this needs to be explored more. I mean, it's one thing we can say, well, the trauma is inherited and they love their offspring, so they don't want to share the trauma with them. That's not enough. That's not enough. And you'll find that this man, this survivor, has a lot of guilt, survivor's guilt. And he didn't even survive the camps. He avoided the camps, luckily. So it's a very telling movie. It opens up that post-Holocaust experience for us that is so important today. And that's on Saturday, the 26th. I don't know what July will bring. I do hope to bring the two Alzheimer's movies to us, Still Alice and The Father. The Alzheimer's stories told from very different perspective, each powerfully moving, with lots to teach us. And we'll have
Father is fabulous. Fabulous.
Well, so is Still Alice. I mean, she won.
Still Alice also, but The Father really touched me.
But it's like both performances are Oscar worthy, and they're so convincingly sick people. At the same time, the emphasis is flipped from the impact on her family to the impact on himself. It's a very scary movie because, and I won't reveal why it's scary, but you're really feeling Alzheimer's from the inside when you watch this movie. And it's to the filmmaker's credit that he pulls it off without losing you. And we'll have Elizabeth Stearns, who's a congregant of Wilshire Boulevard and a longtime congregant of university, who lost her mother to Alzheimer's. And we're going to try for a Wednesday night. I don't know if she's available in July, but that will be great. And she's very much up on current Alzheimer's research and current medication. And especially there's news this week about a very controversial drug that probably will benefit nobody, but got approval. So that's a very topical thing. That'll be on a Wednesday night in July. And I'm very pleased to announce this is a movie I've been chasing for 2 years. And maybe you've heard me mention it before. It's called Jewish Soldiers in Blue and Gray. And it's about Jews on both sides of the Civil War. Families who fought opposite each other. The number two in the Confederacy was a Jewish man. The treasurer was a Jew. There were Jewish generals. And we will have as our guest somebody who participated in the war, a historian academic at Brandeis, Jonathan Sarna.
Oh.
Yeah. This guy wrote the book 350 Years of Jews in America, I believe, Risa. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
a
he's
very well respected,
special.
very erudite scholar. And the surprise was that it wasn't my charm or my expertise, but when I said I was teaching, organizing this film discussion group at Wilshire Boulevard Temple, he said, Rabbi Leader was my best student. Please say hello to me. So then I invited Rabbi Leader to introduce Jonathan Sarna at our event. And he said he'd be very happy to do that. So it's a bit of a reunion, but this Sarna guy is great. He has a very unusual way of speaking that is not snobbish at all. He's just very poetical and but expressive.
Brilliant.
And when you see the movie, you'll see him, and the guy's terrific. You know, really a real font of American Jewish history, and a great explicator of all things Confederate. I'm sure that's not his strongest suit, but he wrote the book on 350 years of Jewish history. So that'll be in August. I don't know what else. I am going to reintroduce some Asian filmmakers. We'll probably see an Asian and an Indian filmmaker in August and July. We'll keep mixing it up. So stay tuned. I had fun. I hope you did. Welcome to all the newcomers. Roy,
Thank
great
you,
to have
Jim.
back.
Thank you.
Lady Madonna, you must
Thank
come
you
back.
so much.
This
Thank
is
you, Jim.
Edith.
Thank you.
Good night,
Melanie,
everybody.
good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
And
Good
Randy,
night.
thanks for
Bye.
attending. I didn't acknowledge you.
Thank you.
Okay, good night.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Good night.
Good
Good night,
night.
everybody.
Thank you. Good night.